Before we get really into this one, I want to thank all the homebrew designers and content creators that acted as sounding boards for this script. That doesn't mean this video has their star of approval or endorsement, but their comments and discussions in regards to this script were incredibly helpful in helping to justify and shape my thoughts. You guys rock. Chris Treant Monk Hanalka, Eric Fry of Fry Minis, Heavy Arms, Josh of Dungeoneers Pack, Kibbles Tasty, Ross Lizer of Outlandish Adventure Productions, Trekkeros, and Ukulele Bard. Thank you all so much. In the lineup of classes in D&D 5e, the one class you may be surprised, or in the case of most YouTube and Reddit comments, angered to hear someone dare to claim that it needs a buff is going to be the Wizard. As many of you all that have been around my channel for a little bit know, I've been working on a project since Tasha's Cauldron of Everything dropped that aims to overhaul a massive amount of character options to bring them around the same design sensibilities that we saw in Xanthar's Guide to Everything. I had honestly held off on Wizard for the very end because it seems to be the one that players with a bit of experience in the game look at as one of, if not the strongest and most hyper-viable class in the entire game. But here's a little reality check. If you're talking about the best all-around class across all levels, that title undeniably has belonged to Cleric since the PHB drop. So stop dreaming that you'll ever see a campaign grant you those 6th level and above spells that Wizard's early levels have to suffer for. However, there is one thing that I will say. I do agree that Wizard is a hyper-viable option in terms of pure White Room analysis, but the context of the entire game is extremely important, not just its combat simulation. This class is absolutely fine for what it can do within combat, but the class objectively lacks the artistic heart to help define what it means to be a wizard outside of combat. I've gone on record in the past for saying that I feel that Wizard is the strongest class with the worst design, and I feel like my work on this overhaul only re-emphasized that sentiment. I'm not here to say that Wizard needs any improvements to damage output or combat effectiveness, because the real problem is that the class objectively lacks the roleplay heart to define it outside of combat. Wizard leaves most of its roleplay incentives in being the intelligence class, possible spell choices, and its spellbook, which arguably lets Wizard be a blank slate spellcaster, akin to Fighter being the blank slate martialist. This is a niche that definitely needs to be filled, but I think it's fair to say that both classes deserve something universal and agnostic to all characters of the class to help lift up their interaction and exploration pillars. Wizard deserves to be more than spell list the class. Further, despite being the definitive arcane spellcaster, there's a big disconnect between its subclasses and spellcasting progression, as they're designed to avoid rather than embrace each other. We're most definitely too far into the addition to completely throw out the overall class architecture, but you can still help the wizard out by at least making it to where they can easily get the spells they need to make the subclass features work. So I'm going to address my thoughts on why Wizard needs some changes in a kind of a thesis here, so stick with me. I've got a few points to address. Number one, I'm going to call this Diminishing Versatility. So despite Wizard being remarkably viable, it's been losing out on what makes the Wizard unique, notable, and heavily starved for base class features: its massive spell list. Wizard's definitive power and its budget is built around its spell list, but this wound up with a design that will always lose its power as more spells both on and off this list are distributed to other spellcasters. This is exacerbated when spells that grant similar if not more power are given to other classes, as the Wizard is intrinsically designed around the powers of the spells on this list. This first happened with Xanthar's Guide to Everything to a lesser extent, but the new expanded spell mechanics for Sorcerer's Origins and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything massively exacerbated this issue. In short, as you add more non-exclusive Wizard spells to the game, you add more choices that make the original design less effective at enhancing Wizard's power and versatility. So the broader choice granted to non-Wizards devalues the tax placed on Wizard's spell list exclusivity, and thusly, we now have territory opened up for improvements to the base. Point 2. Poor subclass structure. The years that we've had in seeing this class in play has given us all kinds of information about why the Wizard can perform so well, yet leave players feeling like the subclasses have poor or unappealing aesthetic. The big power level spells are most notably 3rd and 5th level, which are granted to you as a 5th and 9th level character. However, Wizard gets 2 subclass features at 6th and 10th level that in some cases grant you definitive powers a level later than what is to be desired. To help address the perception issue, I proposed a change to the Arcane Traditions built around schools of magic to now grant you a Savant feature that actually gives you a 3rd level spell known at 5th level. The spells chosen for these features are by default those spells that synergize with the other subclass features, but I decided to often leave these as an of your choice option if the class doesn't intrinsically require a certain spell to build off of, which leads into my next point. I'm going to call this section Craftsmen Without Tools. I don't know, that felt poetic. But anyways, there's a famous GDC talk with Josh Sawyer of Obsidian Entertainment, the developers of Pillars of Eternity, The Outer Worlds, and Fallout New Vegas. Dan Felder actually showed me this one back in early 2021, and this talk really helped to formulate the words and define my design philosophies and sensibilities when I'm making character options for this game. You can check this talk out down in the description below. But Pillars of Eternity is really well known for its handling of attributes, which are their equivalent of D&D's ability scores. From the very beginning of development, they emphasized that they wanted any build of a character to be, at the very least, viable. Part of the philosophy of this viability is that the game shouldn't put hurdles in front of you to get the things required to make your character work, and I highly agree with this. Working in this case means that the character option gives you the things that it needs to do the things that it intends to do viably in the game, and not specifically optimally. A character option that is built without giving the tools required to make it work is a trap at best, that will always wind up producing an unpleasant play experience. We have several wizard subclasses that don't pass this test in some way or another, typically by forcing your hand into choosing certain spells required to make your subclass features work. I'm willing to believe the justification for this was to leave the options open-ended, but it winds up causing a trap that can lead to new players having a bad time through no fault of their own. In UI/UX design, we consider this to always be a failure of the designer, not the user. My change to the Savant features of the Arcane Traditions are kind of my fix to also address this issue, and moving on into the next point is going to be the Redundancy Potential. The key to a bad build in D&D is a redundancy. When a feature grants you the exact same thing as another, it almost always feels like you're missing out on something. This redundancy's detriment becomes even more extreme when the power of a feature granted is extremely strong, such as a resistance to cold, fire, or poison damage, and to a lesser but more common extent something like dark vision. Wizard subclass structure means that a subclass that gives you a feature that keys off of a spell nearly always feels like it comes on too late, especially when that feature grants you said spell. Necromancy Wizard has had a particularly weird hiccup wherein they get Animate Dead given at 6th level rather than at 5th level, where Wizard could easily pick it up as one of their wizard spells known. So not only do Necromancy players have to be patient to get the power of a feature, they're objectively worse for not doing so because Undead Thralls specifically states that you can only get the spell if you don't know it already. This type of design leads to a lot of feel-bads, and Wizards of the Coast shifted their design philosophies around redundancies following the player's handbook. However, Necromancy Wizard notably has never received an errata. The subclass has potential in a white room to cause absolute chaos. I've done a review on that one and, did my analysis of just exactly what this could do. It's pretty nutty that you can raise up an army of 4,000 hit points worth of undead, but keeping Animate Dead known for free at 6th level does nothing to reel that in. To quote another designer buddy of mine, Trekaros, the fact that a 5th level non-Necromancy Wizard with Animate Dead is better off for the future than a 5th level Necromancy Wizard that also took the spell is 100% an issue, and I totally agree with him. Granting this spell to them earlier isn't something I consider a buff, it's a fix. The change you'll see to the Necromancy Savant feature I wrote is inarguably how this option should be designed to work. This last point here is one of my favorite fallacies I came up with earlier this year. I call it the wish fallacy. Detractors of the idea that this class needs improvements often try to invoke the power of Wizard's later level spell list as some kind of justification for why the class can't ever be touched, as if this class is somehow balanced on a razor's edge. Spells like Meteor Swarm and Wish provide an incredible amount of power to players, if they ever get to experience them. Research shows that less than 2% of campaigns ever progress beyond 10th level, so it's odd that these spells are somehow used as the justification that Wizards have to lack much of any base class features. This line of thinking leads to a class that's entire power budget gets blown entirely on this pipe dream that the majority of campaigns will never be able to actualize. Backloaded power will always lead to a poor play experience, and I mean, this is just something that we know as designers. But I call these detractors' line of thinking the wish fallacy, wherein someone involved in a discussion about game design inevitably brings up an element of the game that isn't designed for conventional balance analysis. This fallacy has been invoked for years as a means of apologizing for broken and overpowered homebrew from people's favorite internet personalities.
Balanced.
But it also applies to those arguing against a class that gains these powerful spells receiving buffs. There's kind of a yin-yang there. It's used whenever people want to shut down a conversation because they really like the creator, and conversely whenever they just want to disagree with somebody about why they want to buff something up. The sentiment shutdowns discourse and tends to be used as some kind of trump card rather than an actual legitimate argument. Spells like Wish are intentionally designed to create major meaningful story moments, not just used every damn day like Fireball. When people try to bring this up in an argument, you should immediately ask them to elaborate on why. If they list spells like Counterspell, Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Meteor Swarm, or Wish, just refer them to the Bard's magical secrets. In a game that has 5E's Bard, spell list exclusivity is not a thing. So here, in closing out this little thesis, we've definitely been given the wiggle room after other classes receive buffs to show Wizards some love. The changes you're going to see in this video aren't meant to address Wizards' viability, they're just meant to help enhance the class's roleplay without drastically increasing the general power of the class. One change I originally proposed whenever I looked over Order of Scribes is that I thought that this was a subclass that was just so good for the identity of every single wizard that it needed to be broken out into optional class features. Really, to me, what this wizard represents is something that I think that Wizard as a whole should have represented off the very get-go, right? And this is a subclass to me that I think should really define the wizard archetype in future editions of D&D. I think that we should look at this as the precedent for what it means to shore up wizard outside of just combat. So what I've done in my change is break apart the Order of Scribes wizard into different spells and optional class features. The Wizardly Quill and Manifested Mind are now going to be a cantrip and first level spell respectively. The ability for you to use your spellbook as a spellcasting focus just felt kind of core to what a wizard should be, so I threw that into the spellcasting feature. I don't think that that causes any big dramatic changes. The later levels, I really like the Master Scrivener feature, so I decided to split that up. One thing that I did was the very last paragraph felt like something that could be so cool for every single wizard. And that's this ability that I created here called Scrivener of Scrolls. I mean, I say created, I just copy-pasted. Scrivener of Scrolls, the research and scribing of spell scrolls, has made you adept at crafting spell scrolls, which are described in the treasure chapter of the Dungeon Master's Guide. The golden time you must spend to make such a scroll are halved. It would be my hope that something like this would make wizard characters think about allowing their allies to take some of their spells that they can put onto spell scrolls. This feels really interesting. Me as, someone that made the merchant class, I'm all about downtime crafting identities here, and I think that the wizard as the researcher of the arcane, it makes a lot of sense for them to get something like this, just generally on all wizards. Since all wizards are going to have a spell book, why not? And now Master Scrivener would be a buff. What this would essentially be is a freebie first or second level spell that you can get once per long rest that gets upcasted by a level, which is nice, but it's not something that I consider to be a huge tax on the power budget. I think if I'm going to lean into the idea of wizards are researchers and writers of scrolls, it would make sense to help build on that identity later on. And again, because this came to Order of Scribes, it felt like something that could be really cool to tack on here to the wizard whenever they get into that third tier of play. What I thought might also be cool is to actually just break this up into its own separate feat, because it feels like it would fit in with Ritual Caster and all that stuff. This idea of you can pop out a temporary scroll, whatever, it might even be worth it later on to split this and Scrivener of Scrolls apart into a feat, but as of right now, I really like it actually at 11th level for the wizard. It comes on a level later than it would have for Order of Scribes, which I don't think is a dramatic balancing measure by any means really, but it does prevent this feature from coming online at the same time as all the Arcane Traditions get a pretty nice 10th level bump. I'm going to save some of the material that I probably could use for this video for the wizard tier list, so that way people can just check that one out, and yeah. But I will make some brief notes into why I made some changes to some of these Arcane Traditions. Now, while I didn't do a lot of buffing to the base class, the subclasses are another story. Some of the Arcane Traditions are going to get major changes, and then some of them are just going to get the additions to their Savant features. Starting out, Bladesinger, I'm not going to touch it. I don't feel a need to really mess with Bladesinger. It's kind of doing its own thing. At my table, we just use Benjamin Huffman's Magus to get that kind of sword fighter gish across, and I have just had so many players give that really good feedback that I just opt to keep using that. Alright, Chronurgy magic. This is going to be the only one of Matthew Mercer's that I'll really touch, because this one is objectively the most broken wizard subclass in the entire game. You should not allow this on your table as is, just a hint to DMs out there. It's not too egregious from 1st to 9th level, but as soon as they hit 10th level, this one will break down fundamentally the casting time and range balancing measures for spellcasting rules. Treant Monk did a really good breakdown as to why this one is so busted over on his channel. It's too strong for conventional play. I've listed a fix for it right here that should reel this one in, so feel free to use this and throw it into your games, and then Chronurgy magic should be, you know, whatever. The subclass, even with this change, doesn't really hit all the time wizard notes for me that I really wanted. So we just actually used the School of Chronomancy from the Chronomancer's Guide to the Future by Haggard Clint. I just think that this does all the time wizard things I wanted it to do, only just, yeah, it feels a lot more sensible and reasonable. Going up next to the School of Abjuration, here's the first Savant feature that you're going to see changed, and this is going to be the through line you see through all these different subclasses. Abjuration is, in my opinion, one of the top, if not the top, most well-designed and put-together wizard subclasses out there. The big change right here to Abjuration Savant, when you reach 5th level in this class, you know the Counterspell spell, if you don't already know it. The spell becomes fixed in your mind, it is always prepared, and does not count against your daily spell preparation limit. So here, with all the Savants, you're going to get a 3rd level spell whenever you hit 5th level. For the School of Abjuration, it kind of needed to get Counterspell here because it's going to key off of improved Abjuration, so it felt like an easy fix. I don't think any wizard is going to complain about getting Counterspell at 3rd level for free, and they don't have to add it to their spellbook, they just know it. Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty nice buff. School of Conjuration, for their Savant, because you can really make any kind of summoner that you really want with this, I just allowed you at 5th level to take any 3rd level spell of your choice from the Conjuration School of Magic. If you're playing with the summons that you get in Tasha's, this subclass actually starts to look pretty good, but that's not to say that it doesn't really need some buffs overall. A lot of these could actually be pretty simple. If you look at Minor Conjuration, I actually really like this feature. It feels like a unique kind of cantrip-like effect, but I think the thing that would easily improve this is just to extend the range a bit. I don't think that that's going to cause any major issues. It's only 10 feet, which I still think is actually pretty nice. You are creating a thing that has mass. The problem is that this doesn't really have much combat relevance, but I kind of don't mind it, honestly, just being a thing that you can make that has weight within 30 feet of you. Yeah, I think if we just granted them like a bonus cantrip here, some people would think that it was too much of a buff, especially in the case of some cantrips, but something like this is already supposed to be a pretty decent cantrip-like effect. I'm just going to increase the range on this and see, I don't know what the general perception of that is, because I think that the range fix could actually solve a lot of problems. Benign Transposition, the only thing that I did, again, increase the range on this. Wizard is going to be a backliner, so like giving you the ability to teleport up to 60 feet, I think is pretty nice. What I do think might be the better fix, actually, is to keep it 30 feet here and then improve it to 60 feet. You guys are hearing me design as we're actually going through here. I actually think I really like this change, because the way that I'm thinking about it is that you can choose a creature and the creature can be something that you summoned. So this is actually a little bit more reliable than what I was initially thinking, but I don't think there's any reason not to allow them to increase this to 60 feet at later levels. So I'm going to add that in as just a buff there at the end, and yeah, I don't know, I'll see the comments and see what you all think. Durable summons for their capstone. I think the issue with this one was that it didn't scale with you. Scaling hit points that you can get here, you know, like 28 or something, it's only going to be a little bit less than what you could get, and as soon as you hit the next level, it's going to be equal to what you could get. So now this being temporary hit points equal to twice your wizard level, this will now scale with you and be a little bit more of an incentive to take this class all the way to 20th level, despite the fact that you most likely won't make it to 20th level. Yeah. Alright, School of Divination. The fact that I think that this one needs a buff is going to ruffle some feathers, and let me just explain here. School of Divination is a subclass that lined up 3 people on base, but was not able to get the home run. This was so close to being a complete knockout and one of the absolute coolest wizards in the game. The Portent feature is one of the coolest, most flavorful, defining, and interesting mechanics of any subclass in the game. I absolutely adore what Divination wants to throw out. However, it has this really unfortunate blemish on the third eye. Its 10th level feature, originally granting you dark vision as an option here, was just why? It didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense that, like, of all the other stuff that you could do with this, that you would really ever take dark vision, especially whenever so many other options got dark vision at like 0 level. So what I just decided to do was make this dark vision a special kind of dark vision that can allow you to see through magical darkness. Bam, now it seems like you're actually going to want to take a look at that. Ethereal Sight, I didn't change. Greater Comprehension, I didn't change. See Invisibility, the last little bit of this sentence I felt like could lead to some odd interpretations. So all I really did was change this to some of the invisibility mechanics that we're seeing more recently developed. This version of See Invisibility is that you can see invisible creatures and objects within 30 feet of you that are not behind total cover, rather than them being within line of sight. Yeah. I think that interpretation and that sort of mechanic or coding, whatever you want to say, is something that we're really not seeing WotC move forward with, and it can lead to some weird interactions. So yeah. School of Enchantment, I have a really weird history with this one. So this is one of the first subclasses that I think I kind of brought to the YouTube forefront and exposed for how terrible this option was. I think that this one, I'm pretty proud of that video because I think it helped me kind of leave my mark on the YouTube sphere. But it's an old video, could definitely use some updates and more, how do I put it, modern Taron video editing techniques. But anyways, so Enchantment Savant, whenever you reach 5th level in this class, you learn an enchantment spell, all that good stuff. Going on to Hypnotic Gaze. Hypnotic Gaze, so you as a wizard would be suicidal to get within 5 feet of another creature and try to get this thing to go off, because you then lock yourself into that position. I think that at most you should be forced to get up into the midline because you're still lacking some of the survivability that midliners are going to need. I think that even by increasing this range to 30 feet, it gets to the point of where it's going to be usable and not so dangerous to you, but there's still going to be the detriment of you need to lock yourself in place with this thing. You can't move away from it, so it still has that detriment there that you can't move more than 30 feet away from the creature, but you're given the wiggle room here to GTFO if you really, really need to. Instinctive Charm, I made it to where this is going to feel like even in an encounter where an enemy is immune to being charmed, like you still have at least something of a feature here. The very end statement of this says, you must choose to use this feature before knowing whether the attack hits or misses, but creatures that can't be charmed have advantage on this saving throw, rather than they are immune to this feature. So you get into certain fights, let's say the DM doesn't really think to throw in a bunch of minions in order for you to possess or do whatever, at least this is still here. And in the case of like legendary resistances, if this thing succeeds on the save, then bam, it's not going to work. The effect is, you know, whatever. So it allows for a little bit more interplay, and I just don't really believe that subclass features should ever be completely shut out of ever being useful in certain combat situations. And Charmed and Frightened are two conditions that we learned that at later level play can be pretty bad, honestly, from going from player to DM. We saw Wizards of the Coast recognize this in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. If you look at the Fey Wanderer Ranger, there's the Beguiling Twist or whatever it is that allows you to redo the charm if something succeeds on the save or something like that. But it allows you to get more use out of your features rather than just, I charm this thing, it fails, well, there goes my turn. All the different wizard capstones here at 14th level are going to feel like all of your spells will be altered in a pretty significant way, or you will be altered in a fairly significant way. And I think that Alter Memories, giving it this kind of change, is going to be really nice. You gain the ability to make a creature unaware of your magical influence on it. When you attempt to charm a creature whose intelligence score is lower than yours, you can alter the creature's understanding so that it remains unaware of being charmed. The last paragraph on this I actually think is pretty fine, if not a little bit more, flavorful and stuff I'd really like to have seen out of more wizard subclasses. I'm just going to leave that one as is. I think at that point, the School of Enchantment actually feels way more viable and like something that was designed with the Xanthar's Guide type of sensibilities. So moving on to the next one, which is going to be School of Evocation. I wanted to actually give a really big shout out on this one to Heavy Arms for his sick capstone idea on this one to help reel in the power of that thing. First off, the Evocation Savant is going to be the same thing that you all know and love. But going on to the capstone, Heavy Arm's big change to this was so cinematic, and mathematically it looks insane. But practically, whenever you take this to your table, what this does is prevent a lot of the lower level spells, like, is it Flaming Sphere, from being a little bit exploitable with this. So Overchannel used to originally read, when you cast a wizard spell of 1st through 5th level that deals damage, you can deal maximum damage with that spell. This version of it is, when you cast a wizard spell of 7th through 9th level that deals damage, you can deal maximum damage with that spell. At this point, this feels like you have really actualized being a full evocation wizard. This feels terrifying, and the most times that you're going to be able to do this is going to be once right now. At the next level, you can do it on your 7th and your 8th level spell. You get to 17th level, you can do it on your 7th, 8th, and 9th level spell. So you're going to be able to do this 3 times max from 17th all the way up until 20th level, where suddenly you can do it again on one of your 7th level spells. You aren't going to chew through so much of your hit points anymore. You can't really reasonably kill yourself with this. I guess it's somehow possible, but I think that this is extremely cinematic, and in theory, there's really no difference between a Meteor Swarm doing 250 damage and one that deals, 500, 600 damage. One thing is going to be able to nuke the Tarrasque, but like, it feels so cinematic and super cool for what the School of Evocation really needs to be. I dig this one. Go check out Heavy Arms. A lot of you probably have the Complete Armorer's Handbook anyways, so yeah, go check out his work. School of Illusion is one that I'm still a little bit confused on how I need to kind of address. I did give you Major Image so that you could have something that would key off of Malleable Illusions whenever you get that at 6th level. I think with Malleable Illusions, without this specifically stating that like maybe the creature needs to remake its save against the illusion because it's now changed, this still just looks like a pretty bad use of your action. But in general, like, I think creative players are going to be the ones looking at illusions. The way I look at this is going to be the cartoon wizard. This is going to be the one that, like, I can just make stuff appear and suddenly it's real, right? With illusory reality, you can quite literally, like, make an anvil and drop it on something's head. Although, I guess it can't really directly harm anyone. God, I want that one to be so good. But looking at the other ones that they have here, right? Illusory Self, I think that this is actually a pretty decent reaction, especially because it's not... It's just something that's going to happen whenever something makes an attack roll against you. This can be a spell attack roll, a weapon attack roll, whatever, and I'm pretty alright with that. And the fact that it causes it to automatically miss... Yeah, I'm pretty alright with that. Malleable Illusions is the one that I think that maybe if it caused the nature of it to change, and therein the creature, if it succeeded on its save, it has to remake it because the illusion has changed. Maybe if it just used your bonus action, I don't know. But it is a school that I could see a lot of DMs interpreting as, holy crap, this thing can go off the rails if I allow it to. As of right now, I'm just going to change the illusion savant to where you are going to get major image so that it will work with your later level stuff and you can guarantee that spell. So yeah, take that for what it is. Now, School of Necromancy, I gave 2 changes, and it's one that I talked about a little bit earlier anyways, and that is that at 2nd level, the Necromancy Savant is going to guarantee you Animate Dead at 5th level. Bam. Already, I just feel like this is a quality of life change. Yes, it will make the Necromancy Wizard a little bit stronger, but it needs this. It really needs this. Undead Thralls, I just removed the section where it says you get Animate Dead if you don't already know it. This is just the improvement to Animate Dead. And this is a feature that actually gets pretty strong now that we keep getting more Necromancy spells added. If this is going to keep working off of like Summon Undead and all that other stuff, I'm going to be really hesitant to touch this while they're adding new Necromancy spells that can create undead creatures. So yeah, I'm going to leave that as is, but the other 2 changes I think are just a really, really nice shift overall for School of Necromancy. For the School of Transmutation, this is one that I made some changes to that I now actually think most likely needs to get changed. After talking with Heavy a little bit tonight, I think that what this one could really use is having the Transmuter Stone being the main thing that you get at 2nd level, sans the proficiency with Constitution saving throws, and allow this thing to build off of that stone and let it key off of that a little bit more. This is one that I think could be the healer wizard in a way, if we allow it to do that earlier. Transmutation, I know that this isn't typically something that seems like a healer kind of an archetype, but with minor alchemy and alchemy kind of being a thing with this, I think that there's something to work off of it with, especially with it being able to restore life by 14th level. It needs to build into that. That sudden restore life feels like a, whoa, where did this come from, right? I get it's the Philosopher's Stone lore and all that stuff, but I think that it could use some easing into that archetype. So this one's unfinished for this video, but yeah. Some of you that see the PDF that's going to be down in the description for this are going to see that I have Lore Mastery Wizard on here. Lore Mastery is one that I'm still kind of pulling some pieces from to see what might fit somewhere else. I do think that a cool thing for Lore Mastery might be to allow this to be the kind of lore bard of the wizard, and see what we couldn't do to possibly make it feel a bit more unique. Moving on from the Lore Master Wizard is going to be the War Magic. So this one, I didn't make a massive amount of changes to. All that I really did was make it to where your power surges could regenerate just a little bit easier and more reliably. Now you can regain 1 power surge in the following ways: when you successfully end a spell with counterspell or dispel magic, when you use your arcane deflection to cause an attack to miss or succeed on a saving throw, or when you end a short rest with no power surges. This also provides what I think is a more interesting effect in that you can spend a power surge to cast a wizard spell 1 level higher than the spell slot used. So it gives you a little bit more versatility here. Well, I say a little bit, a lot, because it's not just going to be damage. You can be thinking a bit more like a tactician with this thing. You're still going to have to expend a wizard spell slot to use a thing, and then this surge to enhance it. Yeah, so I like the idea of this. I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments. But for now, those are all the changes that I've made to the Arcane Traditions thus far. That's kind of my overall thoughts on why I think that D&D 5e's Wizard needs some kind of a buff. It needs just a bit of a facelift to the base class in order to enhance its overall roleplay, what it really means to be a wizard outside of combat. It could use a very, very, very tiny light touch into its overall power. All the Arcane Traditions I tried to do mostly, yes, they are buffs, but what I hope to do are quality of life changes, except in the case of some of these different Arcane Traditions that definitely needed a buff. Let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. A huge shout out to everybody that helped out with this video, to you all for being here, to my Patreon sponsors, who again help me keep the lights on and coffee in my blood. You all are absolute heroes. If you want to hear some more like D&D design and analysis type videos, go check out some of my other material on this channel. My products over on the DMs Guild. I'm the creator of the Merchant and the Dancer classes over there. The Merchant hit gold, and I think that the Dancer is getting pretty close to that. So yeah, go check those out if you're interested in that. Come check out my Discord as well. Anyways, I hope that you all have had an awesome Thanksgiving. I hope that you all are staying safe, staying healthy, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.